months that we're really more concerned about is May and June, which would be just the vehicle renewals. The state did allow people to delay that for 6 months, but the impact there should be minimum. We really didn't see much of a decline for April in the vehicle taxes that were renewed. So no shortfalls really expected on property tax, which again is the largest revenue source. The next one I want to talk about is sales tax. And of course, you all know there's a lot of people not shopping, a lot of people that are maybe shopping really hard. We think people are shopping online if they're not shopping in stores. People are going to have to buy staples. And I think we've all learned the value of toilet paper. And people are out buying those kind of things, which factors into sales tax. So sales tax has a floor that it can't really go below, even when people aren't maybe splurging or buying extra things because they are concerned. But the problem with sales tax, the information on sales tax is there's a 2.5 month lag time. So we just in May, the middle of May, we received our February sales tax. February was a little bit down from the averages we'd seen the first part of the year, but traditionally February has been a down month. January and February both are usually some of the lowest months in the year, and I think it's sort of everybody spends all their money in November and December getting ready for Christmas, and then January and February are slower months. We won't have March sales tax until June 15th. And of course, we don't get the final June sales tax to finish up the year until September 15th. So we're really into the third month of the next year before we know the full picture on sales tax. Before the COVID-19 hit us, we were on track to have probably $100,000 surplus in sales tax. It was really growing at about a 4.5% over the prior year. The way we budget, we sort of lag behind a year, so we budget what we're going to receive the year before. So we would have been about 100,000 to the good. These projections, if the information we've been given by the North Carolina League of Municipalities, the County Commissioners Association, the estimates are all over the place for sales tax. Some of them say we may even still see growth in sales tax because February 1st, all online sales were supposed to have sales tax. And the Department of Revenue has given us no information on online sales, which could have made up for the lack of sales, but we just don't know yet. So most of the guidance we've had is anywhere from a 5% to a 40% decrease, a wide enough range that really it's not guidance at all. So I just think in the rest of this year, we could end up, instead of having a $100,000 surplus, we could be as bad as a $100,000 deficit in this budget line item. But we'll fall somewhere in between those two numbers. And as information starts coming in the 15th of every month, we will update you. The next one is interest income. We've had some slow recovery from historically low interest rates. So we actually were being able to earn a little bit on our money. And again, we sort of lag behind on that because every budget cycle is at the beginning and the rates kept going up. So we weren't budgeting the full amount because we weren't sure we'd earn the full amount. Well, as you all know, interest rates dropped back down to near the bottom again. So we were on track to have a little bit of a surplus in that line item as well. But now I think we're going to finish out this year with a deficit, probably about $25,000 deficit in our interest, budgeted interest for the year. Other general fund revenues, there's a lot of other smaller ones that definitely have been impacted. We, of course, have recreation fees. We have rent of our facilities, penthouse and other facilities, things that couldn't happen this spring that normally would. But those are such smaller parts of our overall picture that the impact, again, will be a very small part of the picture and shouldn't really sway the revenues for the fiscal year that much. The last one I want to shift over to the enterprise funds, talk about water and sewer just a minute. We were tracking a little above budget through January. January was actually the strongest month we had in utility sales. And we knew we were going to lose Commonwealth in December, so we were going to sort of ride the surplus we'd had the first 6 months out for the second 6 months with Commonwealth's decrease, and we should have been right at break even from a budget standpoint on our revenues. For the month of March and April, we were actually only billed 91 and 90% of what was budgeted for those 2 months. So we have seen a decrease in usage for March and April. And really, it's our two of our largest industries that we can trace most of that decrease to. You all know that Unify is our largest user, and Dorada Foods is also a large user. Both of those plants have had some shutdown time, and they didn't use the utilities. So we really we can trace the majority of the decrease to those two large users. We could see a shortfall if the last 2 months, May and June, are again at the 90% of budget. Then the shortfall we would have for the year could reach $250,000 in our enterprise funds. Public Works, we've been in discussions with them. They're fully aware. Chuck and his folks know that the numbers are down. They can see that daily when they're treating water and treating the wastewater as well. So they started cost control measures already. They're looking at being as tight as they can these last couple of months to help us offset some of that lack in revenue. So that's just sort of a picture of where we are. Be glad to answer any questions that you have about that. I think the takeaway is we're assessing it as information comes in. There's just still some things we don't know, and we just have to take that information as quick as we can get it and apply it.
And we anticipated going through, this is a very unique budget process because we're in a very unique period of time, with COVID-19. So we anticipated that you'd have questions, so we wanted to give you this overview to start the process out so you know where we are. And obviously that's one of the reasons why we are currently undertaking and already have for many months cost saving measures, and will continue to do so. In the start of next fiscal year. So we made arrangements for I believe all the council members are on and can hear us now. So we made those arrangements. So we'll move ahead after that review. A few things typically in our budget work session is, we focus on section B, our summary. We still provide the line item budgets for you. Some larger places have transitioned to a different format. If you transition to a different format, however, we try to be as transparent as possible with our council. So we'll work through that. But a few things I wanted to add to talk about similar issues to what Chris referenced in the current year. Things we'll be facing next year that I feel like we should go over that people may have questions over is obviously one of the big ones is the loss of the Imperial Brands Commonwealth plant. That's from the current fiscal year. That's a loss of $408,000 in property tax, and a loss of utilities of $190,000, just slightly over both of those. We have accounted for that. Obviously, the Commonwealth situation I'll share now is very unique in that their valuations of property tax has not gone down considerably yet because the majority of their equipment remains in the plant, but they have shared with Jeff some plans to take some of that equipment to the Greensboro location and their overseas location, as well as they've had some offers to sell that equipment. So the budget we put together shows a decrease of that. Similar, Chris, I believe, to what we did with the Ball. We took some lessons learned with Ball Corporation. So we didn't account for the entire loss, but we accounted for the majority of it, even though it's still there. As of right now, we're not sure how long that'll stay. Chris referenced those issues in COVID-19 that will continue on. We previously talked about at the budget presentation, 9% health insurance, 1.2% pension retirement increases. We have talked for quite a while and continue to deal with the 1,4-dioxane potential negative impacts. Positives, we continue in COVID-19 to have growth, and interest in additional growth continues. We were actually a certain number of the staff on a conference call yesterday with a potential major commercial and tourism economic development project for the city that we're looking at. And part of the reason is our city is so on the game per se that we are working with our private developers to assist them in capitalizing on this low interest rate period of COVID-19. So still projects going along. Obviously, for lack of a better term, I think Jeff and Judy would agree with this. We are a marketing machine as a community, whether it's our Rise Up Reidsville or Rocket in Reidsville or even Team Reidsville campaigns. One of the things Mayor Doniker has spoken about in the past is how when Chamber President Diane Sawyers communicates with her peers, how they've had to put together some type of action plan to get the community involved. In Reidsville's case, the Team Reidsville concept has transitioned excellently over to the Team Reidsville business huddle. And that's another reason why we're seeing so much interest in potential development growth, is we've done a good job in showing how desirable our community is. While we may not be doing as much this year in the proposed budget, we have made significant infrastructure upgrades to continue our growth, both in terms of long-term investment and single investments the past 4 years to prepare for the loss of Commonwealth. And then, of course, our economic development efforts are well known for being very aggressive and very innovative. A few things I wanted to share with you before we jump into Section B is actions related to COVID-19 and other revenue losses. If you, I'm sure you've already looked, but if you see on page A8 in Section A, there are 5 things we're going to implement as the new year starts. There's no need for me to go through that unless there's questions, but those are things that are basically carryovers from what we're currently doing to deal with COVID-19 impacts. Also, as an additional precaution, we have asked all departments to prepare a plan for increments of 1 to 5% incremental cuts that may or may not have to occur over the next year. The departments are actually using the proposed budget to already have those ready. Any changes council makes, they would adjust accordingly, but they are putting together a plan of a 1 to 5% additional cuts as necessary. Actions, a few things I'll mention. I won't, that before we jump into that is obviously there is no cost of living adjustment this year. I know previous years we talked about CPI, and in this case, I'm not proposing a decrease, but the past 2 months were a -0.4 and a -0.8. I think this goes back to what we talked about last year, that we keep our focus on what we as a city can do and what's appropriate with us rather than being driven solely by the CPI. So no cost of living adjustment, but no decreases as well. Also, we recommend the council probably to have a budget overview work session in very late or early to mid-October, once we get these sales tax numbers that Chris is referencing coming in. That's not anything that has to be decided today, but we just want you to be aware of, we'll have a better idea. We will have a better idea of where we are in those months. So once we go there, it could be in a positive format that we do additional items, or it could be that things continue to progress in a negative manner. We have to take additional steps. We have delayed the implementation of year 1 of our 3-year market rate pay plan. We have kept health insurance 100% for the employees and the same plan despite the 9% increase. We have paid that 1.2% pension retirement increase. And my point in pointing that out is, while there's no cost of living adjustment this year, we have extended increases in our benefits and covered them for our employees, and still have a very good benefits plan for our employees. One thing I will mention that we don't need to dive into a lot today unless there's questions, but I do want council to think on regarding the pension retirement plan. That is very important to us. That is a great recruiting and retention tool, so we need to keep it. But I do think it's maybe reached a point where local governments, who are part of the state local government plan, need to look at, do we put in some type of retirement retirement age, such as you can't retire before you're 50, 55, or maybe a little more than that. We think that's part of the reason why the plan is having to have these increases. Last year it had one, this year, and expected to have again next year. So that may be something. I know Mayor Doniker in the past, and still is, but in the past served on the board with the league. That may be somewhat unpopular, but we need to start looking at that from Reidsville's perspective, and I feel like from the entire local government perspective. And then also, Chris, before we jump into section B, do we want, if everybody will turn to the memo and the table on page A24 and A28, just to have it as a reference. Chris is not going to go by it verbatim, but we did want to run through so our council would be informed, and also all our citizens would be informed of what we are doing in terms of calculating our revenue losses. And I will turn to mine as well. Chris, are you unmuted?
I am. So page A24 was a memo that was written on April 28th. So, you know, it's got a little age on it now, but not a lot of it's changed. And it sort of went through the same thing I just talked about for the current year. What we were looking at for property taxes, what we were looking at for sales tax, other revenue sources. But if you go to page A28, there's actually a table in there. And that table shows what the adopted budget was that we're working in, 1920, and what we were projecting 2021 to be before COVID-19, and then what the 2021 recommended budget is. And you can see the change between there. So it may look like we didn't cut the revenues too much, like sales tax. The budget that's presented to you, sales tax is the same as it was in the budget we're working in. But what we cut was the growth, and we had saw actual growth in the current year. And if you kept that rate for the next year, you know, there would have been more money to budget, and we did not budget any of that growth. So really about probably an 8.5% cut when you look at where the money would have been. On property tax,
I'll jump in real quick. That's something I discussed with some of y'all. You know, we didn't want to make massive cuts and then and find out we're not in as bad a shape as we thought. So that's why we've taken the approach of minimal operations to start the year out. Some of those things we mentioned on section A, the bullet points. But we have made cuts. We are in line right now with our peers in the region. Some have talked about anywhere, Chris will probably go over this, as much as 40% cuts on sales tax. In our region, a lot of people are around the 10% or a little less number on that. And I do want to stress, you know, some of this has been due to Reidsville being such a desirable commercial market and our economic growth. And then also some of it is the changes the General Assembly made on how sales tax have been distributed to help rural counties, which Reidsville is an urban small city located in a rural county, and it's seen our sales tax grow a lot. So we're right in there in the same area as the county, and with our sales tax trending up. I just wanted to speak in on that. Go ahead, Chris.
Property tax, we did see in the recession 2008, 2009, property tax is one of the last things that we see affected, because people will pay their property tax because they're afraid they'll lose their property, and obviously they don't want to do that. Also, you think about it, a lot of our property owners are older, and they are on a fixed income, but a lot of times a fixed income doesn't go down. as quick either. So they, property tax really is a slower indicator of poor financial condition in the community because it's going to come in. So we cut the collection percentage 0.5%. Doesn't sound like a whole lot of 0.5%, but we usually bring in 99% of sales of property tax. So going from 99% to 98.5%, it is reasonable to think that is the biggest loss on property tax that we may see. And again, on the vehicle tax, the state did allow that to be delayed 6 months. So we've got two months left here in the current year. 6 months leaves it all in the fiscal year. So if people do delay their renewals on their vehicles, registration and paying property tax in July and August, it's going to come in within the same fiscal year because that 6 months delay is going to end in the next fiscal year as well. So it may be cash flow, but we get in about $60,000 a month on property renewals vehicles. So it's just it's going to be delayed a little bit, but it's going to come in. So this chart really tried to lay out to just give perspective on, even though we could have gone in and made deeper cuts, the cuts are there to where we could have been if all this hadn't happened. And, a lot of people were talking about a V recovery when this whole thing began. Everything shut down quick and it could come back really quick. We may be too far into it now for it to be a true V. It might be a little U, might be a big U, might be a W. We just don't know. And again, we just have to take the information as it comes. You all know as well as I do, things change every day now. So what we thought was the best practice a week ago might be something different. So we just have to wait and see and assess as it comes in. And we will try to keep you all as informed as we can as information changes.
And obviously, Mr. Mayor and City Council, that's one of the big things. We wanted to stress that with our growth, there are more cuts than appear here, and that's why we wanted to be as transparent as possible and put this chart together for not only council to be fully informed, but if our citizens pick up the book and look at it to be fully informed. And that's one of the reasons why we mentioned we'll probably be looking late September, early October when we close the year out to see how the trends are going. So with that, if you will turn to page B1, which is your budget summaries. Obviously, as the mayor said, I'm not just going to read straight off, but jump in anytime anybody has questions. But I do want to mention, starting out on the first few pages, just some info for maybe citizens that are watching our YouTube live channel or be watching it in the future. As we said, our budget is $30,221,950. If you take out the payments and transfers, it is $25,668,750. A few items important for them, for citizens that I know council is already well aware of, is our tax rate remains the same as the current year, 0.739 per 100 valuation. We are having what was voted on at the retreat or shortly after retreat, a 5% increase in our water and sewer utility rates. And with that, we point out one of the reasons we need to remain current with our rates is we have to catch up on some of our past infrastructure. So we are making sure the commitment is there for capital outlay. So $591,000 is proposed to be spent on capital outlay. 190. Go ahead.
Preston. We've covered a lot of ground already,
yes,
and I believe all council's on board. Are there any questions of what we've covered so far from council members, either what's been covered or what we need to focus on by Preston for this meeting? Okay, sounds like everybody gets it. Let's press on, Preston.
Just a few other items on B2. I'll be very quick. I like to let council know when we do an appropriation of fund balance, what it's being spent on. $21,700 is being spent on a IT exchange server. Again, we try to make sure fund balance is always one-time items. That is a one-time item. Replacement of the signal light at Vance and Lindsay Street, $50,000. Well, everybody here, we discussed it, you know, a more residential street like that. Typically, we would probably just go back to stop signs. But as you know, there's one building directly on the corner with sight distance, and then there's one on the other corner, not as directly on the corner, but still sight distance. That's why it's in there. We have been told by Rockingham County they don't have any tipping fees. But if we were to later get told, we would have to increase those tipping fees. The next few pages you'll see is just a breakdown of revenue categories. Again, I'm not gonna go through this, but again, to be transparent for our citizens, we show this summary so they can understand our revenue categories being broken down. If there's any questions on the breakdown of our revenue categories, which are on page B3 through B6, I'll take them now, but if not, I'll go on to page B7. Okay, B7 is the same philosophy in terms of providing everyone, including our citizens, a breakdown of our expenses via department. So you will see that in B9 through B10. So any questions? And I know you all have read this very thoroughly, and our budget process is fairly unique because we do so much of it from January at the retreat all the way through. So I just wanted to share that. But if no questions on that, we'll go to page B11, which are fee increases. And rather than flip through, there's standard fee increases, but proposed changes are highlighted in red. And obviously there's the utility increases on page B14 and B15. Some others I'd like to point out on B17 are some advice we received. We have changed the prices on how we do adult softball leagues, cost per team rather than individuals. And then you'll see some changes to adult volleyball and youth volleyball, as that has become a popular rec league sport. And if there's questions, we can go over that, but you know, I don't want to bog us down on that. If you'll go to B19, there are some changes we wanted to point out. B19 and B20, some changes to how our cemetery fees are being established. And Chuck actually did research in comparison to other areas. We are one of the few in our areas that is a local government operated cemetery, but we're still very competitive rates. But typically on that, cemetery operations, I believe, Chris, are about 80% subsidized via non-cemetery fees. So we try to stay current. Is that correct, Chris, still?
Yes, sir. That's right. It's about 1 cent on our tax rate goes directly to the cemetery.
Yes. So so we want our fees to stay the same, and you'll see there are some changes related to various graves, largely related to non-city residents. But any questions from council? And the reason that we'd be looking at non-city residents increases is, again, as Chris just mentioned, so much of cemetery operations are subsidized via taxes and other city revenues rather than cemetery fees. Okay, we keep moving forward. You get to page B22, which is capital outlay. We feel it's very important for council and everyone to know on that. I'm not going to break these all down, but I do want to say on the general fund summary page, you see $568,500. Keep in mind that a big part of that is debt that was rolling off that we're reinvesting into public works equipment. So when you take that off and you take off the fund balance item for IT I mentioned, we have $91,800, this recurring amount for capital outlay. And we recognize, or I recognize, that as a small amount. But keep in mind, for the past 4 years, our strategy has been to invest heavily into our capital infrastructure in case we did lose Commonwealth, because then we could back off of capital rather than result in a tax increase. So while this may cause an alarm if it's the first time you're hearing it, the amount we're having in reoccurring, we are in a good position because we have invested so much in capital infrastructure and people infrastructure before we got to this budget with no Commonwealth. Actually, I think that's part of the reason that we're in a positive shape to deal with COVID-19 is through lessons learned and various experience at all levels, we have invested in our infrastructure over the past 4 years. So that's general fund infrastructure. You can see that breakdown. Do we have any questions on that? Capital, if you turn to page B26, again, we have made lots of investments in previous years on parks and recreation capital investment, even with our surplus policy at our retreat after we get our audit. So while there is no capital outlay in the proposed budget, that's expected. And again, we have made a lot of investment over the past 4 years into that. If you turn to B27, this again reflects the utility rate increase, but also the loss of Commonwealth. I can't stress enough, you know, we focus on Commonwealth plant being our largest taxpayer, but it was one of our largest utility users as well. So, so it affects the enterprise fund as well. And you will see that in this budget capital, along with other budgets of the past few years, we have a significant emphasis from the direction of City Council in our infrastructure that did not occur in the past. It is, you know, we previously operated our plants under a private sector contract, and I think, you know, before my arrival, city officials learned the investment that needed to be made in that, and we continue to make that investment. Of course, if there was, you know, additional funds, that would be great, but we feel like we're right in a very good position with the investment of $591,000 on that. If sorry, go ahead.
Preston, if that's true, why is there such a disparity in what was requested for plant maintenance to what was recommended?
Okay, we can go through that. If you look at it, and I will say some of the items that were not included in the budget, if you turn to B28, page B28, you will see 3 items that we are either will fund in the current budget, and one you'll see 2 we're going to fund in the current budget, and 1 we will fund in the we're going to attempt to fund in the current fiscal year budget. So a big part of that, Mr. Mayor, is some of these items I still like to show them. Just say everybody's on the full page and as transparent as possible for my level of City Council. So 3 of those items, the sedimentation basin wall repair, we have been able to do. We expect to do that in the current year budget. We have to wait and see how COVID-19 turns out for us, but we expect to do that. The wastewater treatment plant sand filter trough replacement, we expect to be able to do that in the current fiscal year. Again, bear with us on COVID-19. And then we're not entirely sure on the bulk tank for phosphorus, but we hope to try to do that in the current year. So when you add those amounts, they get closer, Mr. Mayor, and ultimately, we try to recognize every couple years we need to do rate increases, but we try to do them in an incremental amount. So so while we would love to have more money to spend on it, we feel like all of this ties together well, and those 3 items provide a justification. And some things like the Wentworth replacement motor and Wentworth replacement pump, we discussed it, effluent gates and pump rebuild. We think we can push those out at least a year, maybe a couple years. Did that answer your question, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we're keeping up with that stuff, and it looks like you are.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for the explanation.
No problem. And also, I should add, with our surplus policy, we can look at things like that as well too, and that's a compliment to council for stating, you know, our fund balance isn't a personal bank account. We want to have what we need in case of emergencies like COVID-19, but we don't want to be bragging that we're at 200 or 100% fund balances as well.
Right.
So my compliments to council on that. The next, you'll see fleet maintenance. No request there, but we have made investments in the garage in the past. If you turn to page B30, debt service, we like to show this. You will see the two items we're proposing to be in the 2021 budget, salt barn and garbage truck. Keep in mind, we discussed this at the retreats. These are items that, while technically they are new debt, it is basically debt that is coming off of last year's sheet that we're reinvesting that debt service or debt schedule back into items. And we feel like the salt barn and garbage trucks are items that, you know, we could not fit in our budget and are needed. I will say, and I can go in detail, I'm sure there's questions, but just for clarification purpose, a salt barn, we are not thinking of the traditional salt barn like you see at NCDOT locations, the big domes. Chuck and his staff are to be complimented. They work with NCDOT, the maintenance engineer at the Wentworth location. Chuck, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. Do you remember his name over there?
We worked with Jeremy
DeLapp, and then also state officials. They actually a few years ago started a new, I guess you'd call it, Chuck, a chute system, side by side. You want to describe that just very briefly for her?
Yeah, and actually the dome system just does not work because of the conveyor system. So like Preston's saying, we're looking at more, if you will, looks almost like a garage with two large bays with no front on it. It's much easier, it's much more economical to construct, number one, but much easier for us to get the salt in and out of it. And I think it's be a nice addition to our facility here, but we've been mindful of the cost of that. Actually went back through DOT to acquire their previous bid, so we're very confident in the amount that we have shown here that we can construct that.
And this facility includes in it the accessory items you'll have to have around it, fencing, concrete, or going in and out. Obviously dealing with salt, asphalt won't work in that location. So we feel good about that. That's actually part of a long-term project where the city has acquired those lots next to our facility, so that's where it'll be going. And then of course garbage trucks or something we have to purchase on a rotation. So while this is being proposed as new debt, it is reoccurring debt that came off of last year, and that's something we discussed heavily at our annual budget retreats. That, you know, a lot of our general fund debt is going to be reoccurring. Once it rolls off like a fire truck, once it rolls off, we'll probably we'll be recommending the council to reissue it to purchase another fire truck. So, but we're doing very well on the general fund in terms of debt service. As you'll see there, there's other items that have previously been approved. Two items were on the agenda last month, getting financing. We will probably move quicker in July and August to get financing for these two items, because right now with the COVID-19 economic impacts, as you saw last month, we can get favorable interest rates or more favorable interest rates. On the enterprise fund, there is no new debt proposed at the present. There could be projects that come along that we can look at. Enterprise fund has more debt, obviously, than, and we've discussed this at past budget work sessions and our annual budget retreat. It has more debt than our general fund, but keep in mind, it really relates to major long-term projects, 40-year lifespan, such as our spillway, our water treatment plant, our wastewater treatment plant. So those are a big factor in it. Even the one that's in process is related to our B&R project. And of course, we were looking at some headworks issues, but if we get that grant principal forgiveness program that we're pursuing, we will not have to add that as debt. So again, I just take this time for everybody in this meeting and watching to understand, while there is more debt, keep in mind the lifespans of these plants, unless new regulations come along, and these spillways are about 40 years. So they're financed for approximately 15 to 20 years, depending on what they are, but their lifespan is nearly double of that. You'll keep moving on. B31 and B32, I will let Chris run over that. Not as much as we do at our retreat, but just very briefly. touch on some of the changes he referenced and really B31. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. This page is in the budget book every year. It is a historical summary of property tax, and gives you the last few years. Of course, 1920 is still an estimate because the year hasn't finished, and 2021 is an estimate. I will point out there that you do see the collection rate. We could use 98.97 because that was the last year of the official collection percentage for the year that ended June of 19, but we did cut that by the 0.5%. But we were showing because of the loss of Commonwealth, we do have a decline. We didn't completely make up for that loss because they were our largest taxpayer, but they had become a smaller piece of the picture every year. So all the good things you all know about, all the things you actually see now out there, like Love's Travel and Senritsu, things that are actually have come out of the ground, have made up a big part of that. We were diversifying, but we just didn't quite make it to absorb all of that loss. But at the same time, we did not have to have a tax rate increase either. So we kind of back into the numbers, the estimate there. The assessed value is down, and again, that's because we lost that taxpayer. The next page, which is in purple and gold, I'm trying to ease that purple into more of a navy blue, if you can tell. Look at last year's book, but it just gives you a graphic of the same thing. You can kind of see the assessed value, and you can see where revaluations played in. So you all remember last year was a reval year, and we did our best to calculate what we thought revenue neutral was going to be. And revenue neutral was just a slight decrease for us because we had growth. We were one area in the county in the reval that showed growth, and that was represented by a decrease in our tax rate. And the numbers coming in, looks like we were pretty close on that. We had to take the information we had at the time because of the budget calendar, but we did see growth. We saw projected growth and we saw real growth, just not quite enough to make up for the loss of the largest taxpayer. So that's what those two graphs are. It's a lot of information on there. If anybody wants to dig into it, it's in the book.
And I'll
that would have been a little bit better in green and gold, but we can live with purple and gold, I guess.
Okay, is now a good time to take a 5-minute break, or do we want to go through B33 before we do?
I would say let's take the break now, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay.
Okay. Everybody comfortable with 5 minutes? Okay, 5 minutes it is.
You remember to close your screen and mute your computer while you take your break.
Uh,
Mr. Mayor, I'm ready whenever you and council is ready.
let's give it a couple minutes unless everybody, I can't tell, is Chief Festman back online?
He is, we have made arrangements. He's been hearing everything the whole time, so we made arrangements for him. It's not our traditional format, but he can hear everything everybody's saying.
Okay, I can't tell whether Mayor Pro Tem Brown's back yet or Councilwoman Walker.
Yeah, we'll wait for them, those two. Anybody else on staff that's on, if you'll go ahead and activate your cameras, please. All right.
Okay.
Walker's back.
There's Councilwoman Walker. Good.
Mayor, this is Mayor Pro Tem Brown. Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you see me?
No, not yet. But now there you are.
You got me? Okay.
Okay, we're all here.
Leanne and Jeff, if you'll activate your cameras, we're going to go ahead and start whenever you're ready, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, great.
All right.
So we're on B33.
We will. And before we hit, I just wanted to add, while we did show a slight decrease, part of that is out of a precaution with on our historic tax values, lowering our tax collection rate. One thing I did want to add, just for council's knowledge and those, our citizens, is while we have lost Commonwealth plant and we lost Ball Corporation plant, keep in mind we're in a rural county that has historically lost population according to the past census, and yet we still have the growth to compensate for this. So it shows what a economic juggernaut the city of Reidsville is as a market and industrial base. So, all right, page B33. On this, as you will see up top, we always try to show comparisons. Our rates actually reflect the proposed increase in 2021. The other rates show the current fiscal year rate. So other cities and counties may be having an increase that are not reflected in this, but even with our increase already factored into, we are the second lowest in the county. And also, you know, keep in mind, Mayday is lower than us, and we compliment them on that. But they have resale customers and supply water and sewer to their two adjoining towns, Madison and Stoneville. But one thing, and I don't know if Mayor Doniker wants to expand on this, he's always very right in saying this. If you look at the lower chart, our operating margin, you know, about 5 years ago, we went to a 1.09 operating margin and been very successful. Chris does a great job putting this information together to show the total picture of our utility system. And you will see we are the only ones that are achieving what's recommended to have funds coming in to reinvest in your system. So it is not a long-term recommended route to be charging under a 1.0 operating margin. So move it. So do we have any questions on that before we move on? And then after that, we actually get into where we break down our positions. No new positions this year, but we still included that for transparency purposes and knowledge. And that's where we are. That completes the budget summary. What I will say, a little bit of adding is, I know this was a different proposed budget than what we normally have done the past few years. It obviously is different than what we even talked about from our annual budget retreat in January. But again, COVID-19, the impacts of that and the foreshadowing of that was probably not, I'm not going to say nobody could have projected that. There's probably somebody that did project it. But obviously that has been something that has been tough to account for. So we've had to make some hard choices. But again, we want to approach this budget both from a positive and negative side. As we get into it, we may come back and talk to council. We plan to come back and talk to council in that late September, probably most likely October range. We'll have our annual budget retreat where we can discuss things again in January, late January, early February. So this will be a unique budget. As Chris shared, it probably will not be a V economic recovery. Hopefully it'll be a U and a smaller U. We don't know. And for those that are unaware, when they talk about a W, that means that it could be a relapse of COVID-19 impact in our economy again. I don't know if that's the case or not, but we certainly hope it does not occur. So again, we have had to cut back on our budget this year. We will continue to do so. We're going to operate as lean as possible in the first few months till we know better where we're at. But we continue to make investments in our community in terms of the service to our citizens as public servants. We also invest in the quality of life here. And again, while this may be a budget process that is not as controversial as other localities, I think that's a reflection on City Council's commitment and efforts that our budget process at the City Council level really starts in January at our annual budget retreat. For staff, it starts basically as soon as we present the proposed budget. We're still here to work through this budget process, but we already start working on next year's budget once this budget is presented and then hopefully adopted. So it is a year-round process for us. That's why ours runs, I feel like fairly smooth. You know, there might be bumps in the road, but I feel like it goes well. So I am prepared, and I'll coordinate through staff any questions I can answer. But we're here, Mr. Mayor, to take any questions and discuss other things as council requests.
Questions from council? Are you all stunned, or are you just pleased with how the budget has been pulled together?
Very pleased with how the budget has been pulled together and understanding of what we're going through with this COVID-19 situation. And like Preston said, it looks like we're going to be traveling through some muddy waters as we go through this particular year. The budget's probably going to go up and down. Just have to hope and pray that it'll go to the city's advantage. Very happy to see that we haven't had to lay off anyone with the exception of, or furlough anyone with the exception of our part-time. And hate we had to do that, but it's just one of those things that we've had to bite the bullet with in this particular situation, this uncertain situation we're in. Thank you, staff and Preston.
And the fact that it's been explained about how we work toward our infrastructure a little bit each year. I think about what's going on in Michigan right now. I think they probably wish they had done that for a lot of years.
True. Any other comments from council?
Mayor, I would just like to thank Preston and the staff for putting together this budget in some very uncertain times. I think they've done a very good job. And I think we're going to get through this.
I agree. Well, if there's no further business, we could consider to adjourn, but I would recommend that we come together again maybe next week or the following week, just to touch base again about the budget. Like both Preston and Chris have said, it kind of changes from day to day. The second reason it would be good for us to come together is COVID-19 is not going to be going away in the near future, and we're going to be meeting more often by Zoom, so that the public can see us meeting, and also so that we can communicate in as best a fashion as possible. So having another special meeting either next week or the following week might be a good way to get kinks worked out of the system, so that when we have our council meeting in June, we all feel a little bit more comfortable with using the Zoom process, and making sure our computers are ready to work like they should. So if you have your calendars nearby, the next 2 Wednesdays, I know it's not all about me, but I know the next 2 Wednesdays, I don't have any conference calls scheduled for business. So if we want to meet more during the day on either of the next 2 Wednesdays, whether it be at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Oh, hang on. Preston wants to say something.
Mr. Mayor, we would like to have a meeting, staff would, or I'd like to have a meeting next week, and it could be via Zoom, to discuss Executive Order 124 and the payment plan process. We need council to vote before June 1st on that.
Okay, so it looks like, how's everybody's calendar for next Wednesday to discuss those 2 items?
Totally open.
Is there a special time during the day? I know that Angela has training at 3 o'clock or 2:30 onwards. So if we could do it maybe in the morning, not as early as today. I appreciate everybody accommodating to my wish of us meeting at 8 a.m. just so I can get onto other conference calls later today. But next Wednesday, is there a time that's most convenient for everybody on council?
Early morning is good.
Like when you say early, do you mean
8, 9?
Okay. How about the rest of the council?
Early
10.
morning is good.
Yeah, I think a 10 as well.
Okay, 10. I hear 2 10s and an 8. Captain Hairston,
Either would be good for me.
either? Okay.
But
Yeah, 10 is good.
10 is okay?
10 is good, yeah.
Okay, how about Chief Festiman? Is he,
Chief Festerman, how does next Wednesday at 10 a.m. work for you? He said if it works, do you want to tell them? They can hear you. Go ahead.
If it works for you guys, it works for me.
He said if it works for you guys, it works for him.
okay. Anybody else have sounds like everybody can do at 10 o'clock next Wednesday. That'll give us enough time to announce it, right, Angela? Good. Okay, let's plan to do it next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Without any further business, I'd take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Okay, Councilman Gorham.
Second.
Okay, we have a second from Councilwoman Walker. All those in favor signify, just raise your hand because then we can all see it. All the ayes, great. Oh, Councilman Festman, do you have an aye for adjourning?
He did.
I heard it.
We got to
Okay,
get him a better tin can.
yeah, that's right. A better string and a better tin can. Okay, thank you, everybody. I appreciate everybody meeting early.
Everybody have a great day. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mayor.
You too,
Yeah.
thanks.
Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
All right. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.